Ravi is an award winning sound engineer specializing in audio post production for music and dialogue and visual media. He is currently working as an assistant engineer at Manhattan Beach Recording NYC, where he records music for artists with labels under Universal Music Group, Sony Music, and more. This conversation, personally, I consider it as sort of a gem. My motivation to create these podcasts stems deeply for finding passionate and brilliant individuals like Ravi, with whom I can discuss such valuable lessons in terms of life, career paths, creativity, and general philosophy. This particular episode has a lot to offer. Ravi shares his life story, being an engineer to now an audio engineer, being Indian American, and also very grounded and practical advice for young people who want to pursue a career in creative fields. I hope you find this podcast of value, and I've enjoyed this immensely.
I I consider that a big part of who I am and where I am today. And so, anyways, I'll kind of take it back and explain my story in a nutshell. And so, my name is Ravi. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, and music had always been a big part of my life growing up. So I was like, I attribute it all to when my dad brought home a keyboard from Guitar Center, because he also wanted to be a musician in his heyday. And so he brought home a keyboard from Guitar Center. He started playing on it. And I started playing on it too. I naturally got curious. I just started I popped in my headphones. I would start pushing keys on the keyboard until it sounded like the music that was playing on my ears. And that's how I self-taught myself piano. Same thing for guitar. And then whenever it came down to middle school, I played in the band. So I played the French horn for 9 years. And anyways, all that to say, music was like a great hobby for me. It was a thing that I enjoyed. I was really, really passionate about all that stuff. But when it came time to go to college and pick a major, it was exactly like what you were saying. Like, you got to pick the doctor, lawyer, engineer path. You got to pick something stable that's going to provide you, a meaningful career that will financially be fruitful and give you the ability to have some of the life goals that I think our parents prioritize. And so, anyways, that being said, I went to school for petroleum engineering at Texas A&M down in
Wow, that's such a hard
yeah.
U-turn, right? Okay, go
Yeah,
on.
crazy U-turn. Yeah, so music I fully put to the side. I was like, all right, that was just a hobby, and engineering was taking up the majority of my time just because the classes are naturally hard. I graduated in 2018 and was blessed to do the double internship into a full-time job right out of school. And so I went to go work in the energy industry in Texas. And I realized pretty quickly for myself that though I had all the stability and the things that I was promised, I was just left very unfulfilled. And so I basically kind of decided for myself that I'm going to give music a full-time shot. I would rather take my chance at doing something where I was fulfilled and happy and make less money than make more money and end up like a lot of the folks that actually I was working with at my company who were, approaching 50, 55, 60 years old in retirement, and only for the first time in their lives actually doing the things that they had wanted. I was like, I'm in my 20s. Like, if I'm going to take a shot at this thing, might as well try it. And so I quit my job in 2021 after 3 years of working full-time in corporate America. In 2022, I packed my bags and moved to New Jersey to take a shot at the music industry with pretty minimal plans. And I'm sure we'll get into all that stuff. Literally booked an Airbnb for a month just to see how it would go. And then 2023 now, like, everything pretty much just kind of skyrocketed from there. I'm now working full-time at a recording studio.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah. So to go back to your question about the whole, doctoral engineer versus the creative career thing, it's like, it's always been a struggle. And I think, especially as it relates to my parents, like, it's an ongoing kind of thing of like just trying to share the wins with them and get them to believe in the idea. But with more and more passing time, they believe it more, and it's nice. It's
No,
really
that's
nice.
nice. No, I think I also have the same experience because
Mhm.
like, you are a petroleum engineer. So I actually studied civil engineering.
Yeah.
Then took a hard U-turn into film. I teach film as well, so I'm
Hmm.
actually into, like, as you mentioned, I'm also like teaching film media, but also making what I really enjoy, right?
Hmm.
But that was that the transition period
Hmm.
from like this sort of, what do you want to call this, stability, or this
Hmm.
sort of this idealized path, to now that to be in that limbo, right? Because
Hmm.
as you mentioned that you had this job, and when you decided about quitting it, to where you are right now, the distance between these two, that's the that's what tests you as a person, right?
Yes.
That's what tests you. For example, I know a lot of people that really are good musicians, photographers, creative people, but they just don't have that passion. They would rather stick with their corporate job, and it's no knock on any of them, but I
Hmm.
feel to be a creative person and to sort of just say that this is my life, it
Hmm.
also needs a different sort of this personality trait, right? That
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking
you
about.
actually have to have that fight in you, because
Hmm.
it's not even older generation, people your age also sort of criticize and question you.
Right. Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
so when a lot of people, I consume, so a lot of Indian or South Asian film where they just critique our parents' generation, I feel that, okay, that's one part of the picture, but you are not talking about how people our age are also
Hmm.
sort of complicit in also just seeing and just being
Right.
staying on this so-called stable path where
Hmm.
until you are 55 or 60,
Yeah.
you just earn money and then it just hits you, right? That's why people
Yeah.
have midlife crisis. These days,
Uh-huh.
people are also having quarter life crisis, right? This is the term that
Totally.
has been, so this has been super interesting. So I want to ask you this. So my
Hmm.
question would be very specific, that specific part where you booked your Airbnb for 1 month, where I would assume that you were just sort of just betting on yourself, right? That's
Hmm.
it. You just trust yourself. Uh, so let's say someone is listening to this, uh, how would you sort of advise them to just
Hmm.
trust yourself, trust your instincts, intuition, and also how should they communicate with other people who are doubting them in this
Yeah.
process?
Yeah. So, I'll answer the second part of that one first.
Definitely.
In terms of communication, I would just say, uh, a lot of it you have to believe. Yeah, the belief has to start from yourself, right? And so, as long as you exude a lot of that confidence in yourself and just continue to share your wins, I think that's a big part of it. The belief from others, not that that's required, but the belief from others will come with time. The first half of the question, I actually have, I get this question quite often, and I have a bit of tangible advice. Usually people ask, how did you make the transition from corporate to doing music full time? And just like you were saying, it wasn't an overnight sort of thing, and it took a lot of careful planning. Um, so to me, in my head, I think very tangibly of four different pieces of it. The first of those is savings, and I think this is the most important one because your savings, especially like in the creative careers, they don't pay a lot, especially at the beginning. To get your foot in the door, oftentimes you're doing unpaid work, and when I say unpaid work, I literally mean 1 to 3
Hmm.
years of
Definitely.
that type of thing until you
Hmm.
have portfolio and all that stuff. And so, anyways, that being said, savings I think is your lifeline. The career that I worked for for the last year, I've worked at a recording studio, and I'm not at liberty to say exactly what the pay was, but I'll say it's
Hmm.
very in line with that. It's very in line with industry standard for first couple of years. And so that being said, my savings from my corporate career, from the 3 years that I did work, was my lifeline. Like it was the reason why I'm able to afford the apartment that I'm in right now. It's the reason that I was able to feed myself. It's the reason that I was able to take care of myself without having to lean on my parents. And so savings, I think, is one of the most important things to have whenever making the jump from uh, corporate or whatever your stable career is to a creative career. I think another piece of it that's not as important for the music industry, but could be important for other careers is education. So, one thing that I started back in 2019 was an online degree with the Berklee College of Music for music production. And it's very casual. I just do like 1 or 2 classes a term, and I'm just kind of taking a bachelor's degree, a second bachelor's degree. Um, Slowly and on my own time, but the education was a piece of it that I wanted because I never had any formal training in music. I
Hmm.
never had any formal training in sound engineering. And so for me, the money and time was worth it to get the knowledge that I was missing so that I could be a better sound engineer. So education, that's the second one. Um, The third piece of it is portfolio. So while I was at my corporate job, I started taking on freelance projects just on the side, like in my evenings and weekends and stuff like that. That way, when I did quit my job, I had at least something to show for it, you know. Every creative career is unique, and I'd say for mix engineering, people ask, all right, what songs have you worked on? What short films have you worked on? What podcasts have you worked on? Show me examples of your work. And it's good to have that, at least a little bit of that, prior to your leaving your corporate job. And then the last part of it is a little bit less relevant to the music industry or whatever the creative career choice is, but it's experience. And when I say experience, I mean like how much time you actually spent at your corporate job, like your previous career. The reason being that if you do, for whatever reason, decide to go back to your old career, you have some sort of experience on your resume to lean on to come back to, right? And so for me, my choice was I worked 3 years in corporate, and so 3 years is like a solid amount of time to come back and be like, okay, you know, I have some experience in this industry still, and I can come back to my old corporate career if I decide that music or whatever the creative career isn't right for me. So those four things one more time are savings, education, portfolio, and experience. That's what I usually tell people if they're trying to make the leap.
No, that's I feel that's such a solid answer and such a well thought out sort of divided advice, because this is something that anyone who is sort of in two minds in
Hmm.
taking this leap from, let's say, switching their majors or to leaving their job to sort of pursue their creative dreams, whatever that may be.
Hmm.
uh, it is definitely something that I also advise, because for me, uh, when I actually decided to change, like you, I was a civil engineer and I
Hmm.
decided to make that switch. The first thing was to educate myself, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
That was sort of this personal idea that, hey, I need to be good at what I do. So that's like a lot of informal training, right?
Yeah.
A lot of self exploration. Then uh, creating my portfolio, right? So
Hmm.
that if I actually go knocking at someone's door, I do have all these list of experiences, right?
Hmm.
I'm not really waiting for anyone to just like hand me something, but rather just start working on whatever unpaid work that I get,
Yeah.
whatever I'm getting, just to get the foot in the door, as you sort of mentioned previously. And
Hmm.
and the third thing that's so important is that you mentioned that you got sort of this degree, that you take an online course from Berkeley, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
College of Music. For me, I realized that, hey, I need to get my master's degree
There
in
you go.
in film and media, because
Hmm.
if anyone has to take me seriously, they will only, because if someone is hiring me for a position, even if they like me, they would have to see that, hey, this person actually has like a formal established degree. And people these days, they criticize college degrees that they are expensive, and I get their point that they get you into student debt. But in my experiences, my college degrees has been able to pay me back so many times over and
Hmm.
over.
Yeah.
It has just helped me jump the line so many times.
Hmm.
So this is something that people have to sort of realize, that they, hey, when you choose a path, also think about an online course, a diploma, a master's degree, whatever is right up your alley, do that, right? As you
Hmm.
mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And oh yeah, and another thing that you also mentioned, that, hey, if you're working in a job, save, and
Hmm.
then maybe use your savings for, give yourself a grace period, right? For example, I gave
Yeah.
myself a grace period for 6 months, that, hey, this is my 6 month period. If
Right.
I'm able to find a meaningful job in my field and I'm able to do what I love, then it's
Hmm.
fine. Or else, after the end of the 6 months, I'll just go and look for a job in engineering, right? And
Yeah.
whatever,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I do have that. So give yourself a grace period by the savings that you have from, let's say, previously, right? And you don't
Hmm.
have to lean on your parents, because if you lean on your parents, then you are really accountable to them, right? You really have to
Right.
answer them. So
Yeah.
I think I'm missing another piece of your advice, right, that you mentioned. I think I
No, 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 I
did.
think you got it all. Those are the four things. Those are the four things.
Yes.
And I just encourage the listeners, like you see the same themes among my story and Anushray's, is that it's like it's these four pieces that really help the transition. And I mean, even if you're going straight into a creative career without having the corporate kind of half of it, just know that these things matter even more, you know. Um, one thing, and kind of tying your first two questions together, one thing that I think is really important to me is because of course, whenever I quit my job, my parents were just like, okay, I have to worry again, right? Because we thought that we had set you up with the stable career, and then now
Yeah.
you're trying to start all the way
Yeah.
over and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so, there's some managing of expectations and relationships and stuff that goes on there. But one thing that I've stuck to ever since I quit was that I will never. I told my parents, I was like, your job is done. I will not ask you for a single dime from this point forward, and I have not to this day asked them for a single dime. And that just, I know that they would. They're the types of parents that are ready, at my beck and call if I need a place to stay, if I need money for rent or anything like that. They're really good parents, and I love them to death. But I also want them to believe that I can be out here and be good on my own and make it in this career on my own. And so to that end, all the savings and basically everything that I've done so far to get to this point, just day by day, they see it and they believe it a little bit more, especially given the fact that I'm not asking them for any sort of help, that I'm making it in this career without, leaning on them the way that you might, if you didn't have the savings or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. That's so endearing that I think that's just the quality of a lot of Indian, South Asian, and Desi
Hmm.
parents, right? Uh,
Yeah,
Even if you fall, they are always here to help you, right? With, let's say,
100%. Hmm.
hey, you need a place to stay, come back home.
Hmm.
You're hungry, we'll feed you, right? But
Hmm.
again, I feel if you are a self-respecting adult and
Hmm.
you just wanna, I feel self-worth is such an interesting concept that it's not about ego that you're not taking money from your parents or that you're
Hmm.
buying your parents luxuries, but rather it's more about yourself, right? That, hey,
Right.
it's about me. Like, I'm not asking any money from you because I respect myself and
Hmm.
I'm betting on myself, right? At
Yeah.
least this is how I think. It's that a lot of people, they just assume that, hey, who's gonna hire you to teach film media and photography courses? And for me, I was like, okay, you are not exposed to this world, so that's why you have this limiting self-belief, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why you think that, hey, I have to come back to you to ask money, like, be it relatives or be it parents are really generous and endearing. They suggest these things, but they care about you, right?
Hmm.
And people around them, the noise that I like to call, be it well-meaning relatives or
Hmm.
well-meaning friends, but they often, because they are projecting their insecurities onto you, right? Because they
Right.
don't really have that clue of that, hey, how you can actually be successful in this sort of career path that
Hmm.
we are not exposed to. So
Hmm.
I think it's a really good piece of advice that, hey, if you are following a creative path, then make a commitment, make a sort of this promise, or I wouldn't say promise, I would say, I'm looking for a better word, like, just like when you just internally promise yourself that, hey, just to respect yourself, that, hey, this is something that I've said, this is an idea, or this is a credo, I would say, this is a credo I've set for myself, that I'm not going to ask money from my parents. And
Hmm.
when you said that, I feel you just start respecting yourself, and
Yeah.
the way you navigate through opportunities, you just have that anchor in your mind. Or else,
Yeah.
if you have that sort of this idea that, hey, if I fall, I'll just go back to my parents, then you won't be successful, at least in any
Hmm.
of your creative projects, right? Because you
Yeah.
are always doubting yourself, you're always second guessing yourself, right?
Yeah. 100%. And I think there's another point that you had just alluded to that I do want to dwell on for a second, which is the fact that making a creative career is difficult. I experienced it for the first time firsthand over the last year, and uh, I will not sugarcoat it. It is one of the most difficult career paths to get into. And I'm not just talking about sound engineering or filmmaking in your case. Any of those things, really any creative careers is an extremely hard career to get into because it's so
Definitely.
competitive. Yeah. The competition, just I'm putting on my economist hat for a
It's
second.
okay.
Like,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
think of, just think of, like, supply and demand, right? Like, whenever there's when there's so much demand for creative career jobs, like the supply of the jobs is low, then the pay obviously goes down, and that's just one aspect of it. The living conditions, the working conditions, all that stuff, that all comes down. Um, Studio engineer life is not glamorous. I work and continue to work over the last year, like all hours of the night. Like, there's no piece of the 24-hour day that I have not worked. And sometimes the shifts are long. I've worked a shift that was 20 hours in length. I've worked back to back, like doubles, sometimes even triples, right? With just like a couple hours sleeping, in New York City, or like even at the studio a handful of times, right? It's gonna take a lot of sacrifice. And that's not just in the work stuff, but it also kind of bleeds into the rest of your life a little bit. Like over the last year, I honestly haven't seen my friends as much as I would have liked to. Same goes with family. Like I still haven't made a trip back home to Texas to see them in the last year. Um, to make it in a creative career, especially the early years before you have any sort of like real tangible experience to go off of, is definitely going to be a challenge. And that's why I think at the beginning of it, like you should make sure that you're chasing the thing that you love, like the thing that you forget to eat while doing, like the thing that you could do for hours and hours on end without pay, without any sort of breaks, stuff like that. Like the thing that truly fulfills you and makes you happy. If you're doing that thing, then it makes all the challenges of a creative career less, I wouldn't say like less of a struggle, but they're more tolerable.
Yeah, definitely. No, I
Yeah.
feel that I want to say that it is definitely true that you mentioned that breaking into any creative industry, be it filmmaking, be it music, be it painting, be
Mhm.
it I don't know, just like if you just make a list of creative industries, it's just incalculable. Anyways, the
Mhm.
point being, it is tough. It is not like it is supply and demand at the end of the day, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. It's just like, but that's the thing, right? Creative industries are something that are made of really, first of all, really hardworking people and
Mhm.
really passionate and self-driven and self-motivated people like you, right?
Yeah.
For example, you could definitely switch back to your corporate jobs where you know that you have to work 40 hours a week, 40 hours a week,
Mhm.
and then you'll get these benefits, but you chose to rather work here as a in the studio. It's again it's hard work, but as you mentioned, I wanna just read this term. You can correct me if it's not a
Mhm.
term that you want to use. I would always read people who are working in creative industry as work as play.
Yeah.
R- So, for example, even if you are working, let's say, 12 hours a day,
Mhm.
for the 7 or 8 hours, it's almost like you're playing because this is
Mhm.
something that you really love. So
Yeah.
it makes it more tolerable, right? That's
Exactly.
so
Yeah. That's
this is
accurate.
that's what I have learned. That's what I like talking with a lot of creative people who work really long hours just
Mhm.
to because they need to actually build their portfolios to actually reach a certain place where they can now
Right.
call their shots, right? For example,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure that you are definitely working towards a place where you have your own sort of institution or structure where you're calling the shots and you're also deciding how many hours a week you want to work, right? Because you
Right.
definitely want to give time to your parents. You definitely want to give time to your friends
Mhm.
because that's, again, that is what life is. Life is just not work, but rather also the people that are
Yeah.
around us, right?
Mhm.
Uh, are the experiences that we are also getting outside of the
Mhm.
work that we are doing. So for me, just to find sort of this happiness is just that work as play. That if I'm working 8 hours, it's
Mhm.
also mean that I'm also enjoying myself, right? So
Yeah. Mhm.
that has really helped me. Okay, I feel that I want to ask you this very interesting question now, sort
Mhm.
of switching gears to talking about careers. And I really enjoyed a lot of your advice because they are really practical. Uh, they're grounded in reality.
Mhm.
And it is something that if any listener, uh, I'm pretty sure any listener can get a lot from your
Yeah.
ideas. So I'm really grateful that you shared all these experience with us.
For sure.
Uh,
I feel like the list guy. I
no,
don't have
that's
any I
great.
don't have any more lists.
No, I know. I'm great that you broke it down, broke it so well. And because of that, I was also inspired to share these ideas because these are ideas that are always floats in my head. If someone
Mhm.
asks me advice that, hey, how can I break into this industry? First of
Right.
them are, I just want to say, hey, don't think about coming into a creative industry because it's really hard work. I wish I can just tell you in
Mhm.
person that the struggle that it is. I wish I can just say that, hey, it's such a fun little playground that you come here and you can play. Just
Mhm.
listen to your parents, go get a job. If I feel that someone is not that hardworking, I just don't want to mislead them so that
Yeah.
they just crash and burn right after a year.
Yeah.
I don't really
Mhm.
want to do that. But if there is someone that I feel that, hey, this person actually has the had the right chops to actually just able to
Mm-hmm.
work 10 hours, 12 hours, self-motivated person, can promote themselves, can
Mm-hmm.
also create their own business and companies on the side. I was like, hey, go for it, man. I know that you can do it. So
Yeah.
I talk to them in a different way. So I'm hoping that people who are listening to this falls into that category, that are like
Yeah.
just trying to, okay, these guys make sense, or these guys are also bullshitting,
Yeah.
whatever they want to take from it.
It's two crazy people on a podcast.
Yeah. I wish life was so simple that we have all the answers, but at least I feel we do have some experiences that are worth sharing.
For sure.
And yeah, but I'm really happy that you shared these experiences. Okay. So without digressing further, as I was asking, so first thing I want to ask is, okay, this is very interesting because I am born and raised in New Delhi.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, I moved to Canada to pursue my master's, and now I'm
Mm-hmm.
working here in Canada. Like I'm immigrated, effectively immigrated. But
Yeah.
so the next generations would be Indian Canadians. I would definitely always
Mm-hmm.
think of myself as Indian first. And then
Mm-hmm.
I also say that, yes, I do. I love Canada. I am Canadian in that sense, but the
Mm-hmm.
Indian part is much bigger than the Canadian part, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
So since you are born and raised in Houston, Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for you, when we say Indian American, is
Mm-hmm.
it just the equal sort of weightage, or American comes bigger? Because this is something I'm very interested to sort of talk to a lot of,
Interesting. Yeah.
because I talk to a lot of people who are born and raised in Canada, UK, America, and again, we do have commonalities being Indian or South
Right.
Asian, but
Yeah.
there is a sort of this cultural difference because I was raised and born in India, you are
Mm-hmm.
raised and born in America. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great question, and it did play a pretty big role in my life, I would say. So it's like you're saying, yeah, I was born and raised in Houston, and both of my parents are from Gujarat, so that's where my family comes from,
Mm-hmm.
um, over in India, and you know, I'd say maybe broadly this is kind of under the topic of, you know, how does being South Asian play a role in just all of this, right? So when I was growing up, I grew up in kind of like a middle class suburban Texas neighborhood, and so the majority of the folks at my middle school and high school were white, and so I would say maybe I was like one of 10 to 15 South Asian people that went to my high school. And so it was pretty rare to see other people that were like me in my neighborhood growing up. And so naturally, as a kid, all you want to do is fit in and be normal. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I for a big part of my childhood, I rejected kind of the ideas of being South Asian. So I'd go to temple and stuff like that with my family, but I would never talk or share about those experiences during school. It's almost even embarrassing to say, I think, at this point, but especially like sometimes they would make jokes about being brown and stuff like that, and I used to embrace those types of jokes. You know, I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm the funny brown kid or whatever it was. And basically I think I got to a point sometime during undergrad, like when I was in college, that it started to flip for me. Like I didn't really have as much of an interest in being normal as much as I did being unique and chasing the things that made me happy, you know, as opposed to trying to live to fit the mold of what everybody else was. And so one of the turning points for me was I joined a South Asian fraternity in college, which, you know, that in and of itself was interesting, right? A South Asian fraternity. Like it was just for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by a bunch of, you know, other brown dudes, people who are like me, who had different experiences, who were from different parts of India. And it was the first time that I was like, oh, you know, there's actually like people out there who look like me, who've had the same experiences as me, who eat the same food as me growing up, you know, all those types of things. And then I think where it really started to blossom was post college, right, where I really started to settle into my own skin, decide that I didn't want to do the corporate stability thing anymore, and I wanted to chase the things that made me happy. I realized that being South Asian was what made me unique, and that
Mm-hmm.
was cool to me. I started to, you know, read and learn more about the culture. I started to get a lot more involved with the South Asian community, which is part of the reason why I moved to New York specifically over like LA, for example, is that the creative communities in both of those cities are amazing, but the South Asian creative community, I think, is centered here in New York, at least in the US. And anyway, so all that to say, like it's kind of been an adventure from rejecting the South Asian part of my identity to embracing it and kind of making it what I'm most proud of. one of the programs that I work on, and I'm sure we'll get into the details of this, is like a fellowship program that's made for South Asian American musicians. And so even these days, I think I'm trying to find ways to support the community and be an active part of it. And so going back to your original question, which is the Indian American piece of it, which part of it do I weigh them equally? Do I weigh them one higher than the other? I would say it used to definitely be that I leaned into the American part of it a lot more, but these days I think I fully embrace the Indian American part of it, because I think both pieces of it are a big part of my identity.
That's amazing. No, I feel that's such a, uh, I would say such a complete answer in that sense that you're able to pull from your experiences growing up to your experiences now going to college, and then being now someone who's sort of just renegotiating their idea of being South Asian living in America. This is one interesting observation that I've had, like, because since I've asked this sort of questions to some degrees to a lot of people who of the Desi diaspora, or you want to say the South Asian community spread across all over the world, really. Like I feel that South Asian and Indian people uh, are almost every part of the world. And I am fortunate enough to have had spoken with a lot of South Asian folks. So one thing that I find a common theme was that when they were growing up in the school, it was more about fitting in. So that's why they were leaning towards, let's say, their white friends, and sort of mocking even their brown ideas, right? Brown characteristics, their own, their parents' accents, maybe just being that funny brown kid, as you mentioned, right? Just to fit in, right? Just to find your place in school. But something shifts when you move to college, right? This is such a common theme I've observed. Like, this is the answer that I've got from a lot of people, that, hey, once I was in college, like, something clicked. I just started realizing that it's not really cool to sort of look down upon my culture, my identity, or anything. And I need to sort of find a balance, right? Hey, if I'm able to fit in into American or Canadian or whatever society, I should also give my heritage that equal sort of idea, because that's how I would grow as a person, right? And that's the most authentic way to live, I feel. Authentic way to um express yourself as a person, or in your case, as a musician or as a creative person, right? To pull from both these identities, from your South Asian heritage, from the music, from the culture that you were raised growing up in, let's say, in a Gujarati household, to then also being exposed to American culture, just being in American high school, college. So how can you mix both of these ideas together? So I want to ask you that when you create music now, when you produce music, when you produce any creative content, uh, it does your South Asian sort of cultural ideas and your American cultural ideas finds a fusion, or do you have to consciously look for these ideas to piece them together? How does that work for you?
Very interesting question. I think yes and no. My role as far as like being a sound engineer goes is I'm in the post-production side of things, which that in and of itself was an adventure. Like, I feel like most people who work in the music industry started off creating music for themselves and had the dream of wanting to be an artist, and I was no exception to that. So I think in 2020, 2021, I had written a few songs and released them, and I'd produced them myself. And when I say production, I mean like picking the sounds, putting all those sounds on paper, arranging the music, stuff like that. So I tried my hand at all that stuff, and then I realized pretty quickly that I'm not a good idea generator. I'm not really the one coming up with the initial creative ideas as much as I like and enjoy taking somebody else's idea and then elevating it to the highest level. And so I definitely see myself as like the visionary's right-hand man. And so that's kind of why I lean towards being a mix engineer and on the post-production side of things for music. So anyways, that being said, you asked if being South Asian has an influence in that. In the original music that I did write, it did have an influence. The first original song I wrote was called Proud, and it was literally about the relationship that I had with my parents during the time at which I was quitting and making the transition from stability to creative career. But in the post-production world, it's a little bit less relevant because I'm working on other people's ideas. And that being said, a lot of the music that I have worked on in the last year does have a South Asian influence, just by the nature of the clients that I work with. A lot of them do happen to be South Asian American, and they weave that influence into their music, and I always think that's pretty cool to work on. But by no means is it something that I think I have the ability to inject into music, you know. But it's present, if that makes sense.
Can I ask you something? So,
Yeah.
since do you so I'm just curious about like as like as a sound professional, and thank you for answering that. Like it makes sense that you're rather into production side of thing. It's more about executing those beautiful ideas, and that makes sense. That just
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. So, so I want to ask you that just as like a professional sound person, that's what I want to say, professional sound person. It sounds cool. Uh, uh, if you see any sort of this difference between, let's say, the Indian music industry
Mm-hmm.
or the South Asian music industry versus the American music industry versus South Asian American music industry, that is, as you mentioned, is sort of
Mm.
developing in New York,
Yes.
at
Mm-hmm.
least what you're mentioning. So what's the sort of these differences that you are able to see? And yeah, if
Sure.
you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I wish I had like a coherent answer to give you, but it's honestly like all
It's
of it's
okay.
so, yeah, it's so in development right now that I'm just gonna observe things and it's gonna sound like a ramble. But
Hmm.
but basically, so when it comes to the American, let's talk about the music industry in
Mm-hmm.
particular. When it comes to the American music industry, I don't think that our culture has broken through quite yet, and it's an ongoing thing that I think the community is working on as we have more and more people enter it and into the creative arts and stuff like that. In the American music industry, I think realistically, and this is my opinion, that only one artist has ever broken through properly, you know, to mainstream music, and that would be, in my opinion, MIA. She put out, and she's not even American based; she's UK based.
Yep.
And so I think she put out Paper Planes. If I'm sure the listeners will know that song. She put out Paper Planes a whole while ago, and she's
That's a
still putting out
banger.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a good song. But that was the first time, you know, a South Asian artist broke through to mainstream music scene. And I don't think, in my personal opinion, that it's happened at that level or that scale ever since. And the fact of the matter is just that the majority of the music industry in America is still controlled by a lot of like white corporate suits that see us as kind of a niche market.
Hmm.
And it is a growing niche market, right? But we still haven't seen a South Asian artist make it to true mainstream. I think there's progress that's happening. Like for example, we had Diljit and Jai Wolf at Coachella. I'm sure you saw that.
Yep. Yep.
But it's still kind of an ongoing challenge. The Indian music industry, so I'm talking about you like to the subcontinent of India, is another interesting place because the beautiful thing about India, and for better or for worse, what I'm about to say, is that it's numbers. Like
Mm-hmm.
India can pull numbers, it can pull concert venue numbers, it can sell tickets, it can do great for streaming. And so what's really interesting is I had a great conversation with a woman who used to work at Sony Music India. She spent, I think, 9 or 10 years there, and what we talked about was the fact that a lot of American or UK or Canada-based South Asian artists are actually going to India to build their audiences and get their numbers, then trying to come back to these more Western markets and make it mainstream. I think a great example of that is Raja Kumari.
Yep.
So she's born and brought up, I believe, in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on that, I could be mistaken. But she, you know, when she started her music career, she really went to India to get a lot of her numbers. And if you look at her fan base, if you go look at her monthly listeners, I'd bet that the majority of her listeners are in India. And so it's an interesting dichotomy between the two worlds. You're also seeing a lot more westernized music coming out of the Indian music industry. And there's a lot of interplay there, but I think it's all just a competition to break through to mainstream in the Western world, which has not happened yet. Anyways, all that said, I think we're on our way. I think there's more and more folks like you and I who are entering the creative career industries and stuff like that into the music industry here in America. And we're trying a whole bunch of different things. I've seen a lot of influence of Carnatic music and Hindustani vocals and like blended with Western music and stuff like that. That's kind of been a thing that's been explored over the last couple of years. And I think as a community, we're breaking in a little bit more, but it's still something that like is very much a work in progress. Like I don't think we'll see another MIA for a little while, but I hope and you know I'm trying to do my best to aid in this effort, is that I hope that we see that like in the next decade.
Definitely. And I feel
Yeah.
that, no, I think that's a great observation. Like, I feel that you're able to sort of, I think that's a fair observation, and that's a true observation. I feel the Indian music industry is so big in itself that Punjabi music industry, by the way,
Hmm.
And South Asian music industry is just not even one. It is just so regional,
Hmm.
so it's so diverse. Just giving a little bit more context is that Punjabi music industry is a different thing to the
Right.
Hindi Bollywood music industry. And
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure, I don't know, like, because I'm pretty sure, like, growing up in a Gujarati household, there should be few Gujarati songs that only the
Hmm.
Gujarati community is sort of uh is in tune with, right? So it's just
Hmm.
such a diverse community. So to have a universal artist to break through, it becomes a challenge, right? Because there's just no one singular language,
Hmm.
singular South Asian or Indian language that everyone listens to. It
Hmm.
just changes as we go uh, from different parts of India to South Asian countries. So
Yeah.
that's a one big challenge. But again, I feel Hindi music is something that has sort of, because of Bollywood, has become really big. Now Punjabi music is something that is now being, as you mentioned, right, Diljit Dosanjh,
Hmm.
he's being able to perform at Coachella, right? Because the Punjabi music industry has a
Hmm.
lot of Punjabi listener who are based in Canada, US,
Right.
different parts of the West, right?
Hmm.
And because of that, that's how Spanish music, like,
Hmm.
has sort of broken into American mainstream, right? It's just
Yes.
about a lot of Hispanic diaspora
Hmm.
listening to these songs in America.
Yeah.
So they are not creating westernized Spanish songs, but rather just doing what they do, and it's just broken
Right.
through. That's what that's what I feel that has happening with Punjabi industry. That is just
Hmm.
Punjabi diaspora and community are growing so much, especially in
Hmm.
Canada, is that the songs that are popular in Punjab or amongst Punjabi people are now
Hmm.
breaking into the Canadian mainstream. So that's
Yeah.
what's happening. So
Yeah.
instead of getting an MIA, we can be getting like just a Punjabi singer who sings in Punjabi, but
Hmm.
people have to accept that singer just in terms of numbers that he's or she or they are pulling, right? That's
Hmm.
what you
Hmm.
mentioned, right? So
Right.
this has been my observation. So just giving
Yeah.
my perspective here too.
Hmm.
Now, I definitely want to talk about your platform and the fellowships
Hmm.
that you are giving out. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So what I basically I freelance as in addition to or rather I should say I used to freelance and I work now full time at a recording studio. And so the platform that I built for myself is called Ravi Ray Audio, kind of self-titled after me. My last name is Lad, and so I kind of built the stage name Ravi Ray because Ravi in Gujarati translates to sun, and uh I tend to be a very bubbly person, and so it's kind of the idea. I try to be like a ray of sunshine, to the people that I'm
That's
around.
nice. That's cool.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the idea. If you look at the logo, it's kind of the best of both pieces of that. It's a sun, and then the second half of the sun
Okay.
is a
I'm
sound
just
wave.
gonna, like, when I edit this, I'm just gonna put that logo.
Yeah,
When you just give me this cue. Okay, sorry, go on.
yeah, 100%. And so yeah, no, so I think it's basically just kind of the platform that I've built um to work on post-production and production and stuff like that. And so I've done a lot of music mixing. I've done a little bit of film mixing, TV mixing. I started in the podcast space, so I've got some experience with the dialogue stuff. And so pretty much Ravi Ray Audio is an audio post-production platform. Um, as far as the fellowship goes, however, that is a project that was born, interestingly enough, out of a shower thought. It's just a shower thought that I thought, maybe let's make this happen in real life. And in a nutshell, what the fellowship is it is a award that is presented to a South Asian American musician, that gives them the funding, resources, and mentorship to write, create, and release an original song kind of the proper way that it would be done in the music industry if they had, for example, like a label support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in year one, which was 2022, I self-funded the project just because, as most things like this are, you kind of have to self-fund the first year. And it was a $2,000 award. And what I had done was basically use that $2,000 to create a project team that included a music producer, a mix engineer, a mastering engineer, a cover artwork artist, a social media consultant, and then 4 artist mentors. And basically, this team helped the artist who won the program um, to create and release their song. There was also a celebrity judge. We had Avi the Nomad come and help us evaluate applications and pick the winner. And I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit for a second. There was an application process as well. And so basically what the applicants would do is they would put together maybe 60, 75-second song demo, and they would submit that as well as a couple short answer questions. And then my team, as well as Abhi, reviewed those applications and picked the winner of the fellowship based on that. And it was a great program. Priyamani, who is based out of Los Angeles, won the program. And then we had 2 runner-ups, which was actually kind of an ad hoc thing. We had just had so much interest and so much support from the community for this idea. I think like Brown Girl Mag got involved. We had Third Eye Collective, a whole bunch of podcasts in the South Asian American community. They all joined. I mean, Young Creative Indian Space as well. Yeah, there you go. And it just ended up blowing my mind in terms of, again, like I said, initially, what was the shower thoughts? To see just the whole community rally behind this idea of South Asian Americans in the music industry need to be supported. Just people surrounding themselves around that idea was just crazy to see. And so, in a nutshell, that's what the fellowship is. And then this year, I think we're going to do it again. It's going to be an annual program. And this year we're kind of in the preparation for the 2023 program. And it's just crazy how much we're leveling up. Last year, I think we had 63 applicants. We're hoping to have more this year, and I'm expecting it to be that way. The project team is something I'm currently working on building. This year, I've already gotten commitments from folks who work at Netflix, at Sony Music, at Apple, which is absolutely crazy. And what's the other piece of it? Oh, so this year we actually tried our hand at fundraising. And my goal was to, at the very least, have enough money to fund the fellowship again. So raise the $2,000 that I had initially self-funded last year. And I haven't shared this on social media yet, but we actually more than doubled that amount. We externally fundraised $5,000 for the fellowship, which is absolutely crazy. And so, all that to say, just it goes to show how much there's an interest and a need from the community in supporting South Asian Americans in the music industry. And I hope to continue doing this. And I think the 2023 program is going to be absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like I'm so pleased to sort of hear this, because I feel that these sort of initiatives, which actually are able to sort of have like a very clear idea of what they are and how they're going to support really young artists, South Asian artists. I feel it's just like that's what a lot of people are waiting for. And like if platforms like yours, when they come up with this sort of really well polished ideas with like a specific goals and these actionables, these ideas, so it actually first of all, it definitely attracts a lot of like-minded folks and platforms that are growing up, as you sort of mentioned. And as you also mentioned, that it also generate interest into a lot of these young creatives who are just working behind the scenes, who actually just need that sort of push to actually just go out there, seek mentorship, seek whatever money that you're offering, because that's so crucial when you are just a young artist, to buy those equipments, to just invest in something, right? Like invest in gears, invest in yourself. That's become such an important idea. And second, it actually adds to their portfolio, right? That's such an important thing. And as you mentioned, that if something like this becomes successful in its first year of inception, it can attract big players like Netflix, Apple Music, you mentioned, right? And it just will grow from here onwards, because this has been my observation, that the Indian and South Asian communities have really high aspirations from their artistic and creative industries. But it's just that there are just these ideas floating out there, but how do we actually concretize these things into such something that's really tangible, like RRA fellowships, right? So what you guys are doing is such great work. And as I mentioned, however I can sort of cheerlead this and just let other people know, hey, this is happening, go out there, support this, be part of this, more than happy to do that, right? And I hopefully that has always been my aim with this podcast, just to have conversations with really talented South Asian creatives. And hopefully this podcast can serve as something important to some other people as well, right? Where it just becomes a source of inspiration, or just a
Yeah.
source of meaningful networking, or maybe just knowing about that, hey, there are other creative people out there that are actually going through this sort of journey. I'm not just alone in my sort of this idea of that, hey, I need
Hmm.
to express myself. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. I feel that we had such a nice conversation, and I'm pretty sure that when I invite you again sometime in the future,
Yeah.
we would have again, we can talk more and more, and I definitely want to pick your brain on a lot of other things as well.
Yeah.
But just sort of wrapping this conversation up, I feel I just want to ask you, I would have a fairly general question that I just like to ask in the closing, that, hey, Ravi,
Hmm.
uh, apart from what you do, apart from being you South Asian, what makes you happy as a person? What's your vision for life, just
Yeah.
as a human being on this planet? Like, what makes you happy? What makes you tick? And what's
Hmm.
your sort of philosophy in general?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great question. I would say two pieces to that. You can sum up my personality. The first of those is fulfillment. Yeah, this is not going to sound poetic at all, but just like a life that's filled with fulfillment as a happy life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole reason behind my choosing this whole creative career, is because at one point I mean, as you know from my story, at one point I just decided that I was going to stop living for other people and for other things, and I wanted to chase what made me happy. And you know, even though it's come with its own set of struggles, I'm happier than I've ever been. Like, so, like I just have these moments where, like, even yesterday, where I was just coming home from a studio session, and I was like, you know, I just got paid to work in New York City to make music. You know, like what a great feeling that is, and that's my everyday now. And so to that end, I'm really happy. I think fulfillment is a big part of it. And then I think another big part of it, and I don't think we see enough of this in the creative careers, or I mean, you know, maybe even beyond that, but I just think kindness first. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of I try my best to operate kindness first, you know, like even with the people that work for me for fellowship and otherwise, you know, I even though financially, it's been a big struggle for me as of late recently, I make it a point to pay them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to be a part of the crappy practices of this industry that doesn't respect its people. Kindness first, you know, like at the end of the day, like we can mince about views and numbers and money and budgets and all this sort of stuff that's kind of the minutia of the behind the scenes and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like we're creating art, we're creating things for humanity, you know, and I just think before any of all that stuff, like you should never treat people poorly. And so kindness first, lead with fulfillment. I think
Oh,
we'll end it there.
no, that's amazing. Kindness first and lead with fulfillment. I think that's a beautiful way to live. And again, thank you so much for your time, Ravi. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure chatting with you.